Okay.
More people are joining, so I will do maybe again my intro.
Yeah, me too. Is it better
Let me check.
on YouTube? Can you hear me? Good. They
Okay,
say good. Okay,
perfect.
so start again.
Yes.
So thank you to be here, and we are happy to come back after 2 months of summer rest. First, I'm gonna present myself. I'm Fabrice. I'm a freelance developer, mainly working with Kotlin and Kotlin React on microservice architecture with Docker and Kubernetes. And I'm also a Git trainer. That's it for me. So, Donia?
Hi everyone. I'm Donia. I'm a backend developer at Powder, which is a startup building PC and mobile app. And besides, I'm an organizer of the Google Developer Group of Sophia-Antipolis, based in the south of France. We run events once a month, and we are happy to be here today, as Fabrice said, after almost 3 months of
Yeah,
rest.
almost, yes. So today, what's the schedule of this session? After Sergio's presentation, we will have a session of question and answers, and then we will follow by a networking session if you can stay a little bit to speak about everything you want.
Okay.
So Donia, I let you present our guest.
Yes, I'm very, very glad to have Sergio today. So I met him on Twitter. So I joined Twitter like few months ago. I was an old lady, not having a Twitter account, and I was following some accounts, and I ran into a tweet from Sergio talking about like Edge, Tiny Edge, Far Edge, and I was very curious about it because he was using a special sensor called DHT. We don't care about this information, but I wanted to mention it. And I love this sensor, and I use it for my personal projects. So I was like, I really need to talk to Sergio. So I followed him, and we had this amazing conversation, technical, and just like following up with each other. And I proposed him to give a talk to the GDG, and he accepted. So I'm very honored to have him today. He had some already talks for KubeCon, for OSS Summit. He's like a very good public speaker. And today he will talk about Anthos and serverless, especially with Knative. I'm a very newbie about it, so I hope I'm going to learn a lot of stuff, and you too. So I let you, Sergio, take the mic.
Okay. I Do you think that I should share my screen right now?
Yes,
Yes.
sure.
Okay. Let me share my screen too and my camera. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Hi, Joel. Well, today I am going to present something about Anthos, Knative, and serverless functions. Just to have some context, I am a professor here in Guatemala, so I think that will be more like a class about what is serverless and what things you can use on Google Cloud. So, a little bit about me. Well, I am Sergio Méndez. I am from Guatemala. I work as a DevOps engineer at Yalo. Yalo is a company that build chatbots and work on that kind of conversational commerce, like WhatsApp selling things over the internet and that kind of things. I am also an organizer of a Cloud Native community group here in Guatemala. I have some experience, let's say, like a kind of enthusiast or the experiment with technologies about this technology service, the service meshes. I am a Linkerd Ambassador, so I try to share about this Linkerd service mesh. And my recent work was like working in written some book about edge computing with Kubernetes and specific. So let's get started with the session. Let me introduce you to the different infrastructure evolution and let's move on that. Well, maybe some of us that are watching this session maybe don't have some experience with virtualization, or maybe you are a developer that wants to know more about deploying your applications in the cloud or something similar. So for example, here you can see the monolithics, the containers, and the serverless. So it's pretty common to use like a monolithic application that uses three layers: the model, the view, and the controller, the NVC model. So it's pretty easy to find this kind of architectures or way to build applications. So basically, you have your application and you have different functionalities inside that, and you usually use, let's say, a virtual machine, and you deploy your application there. Something pretty easy to do in general. It's like, let's say, like the first contact with technology for some of us, maybe the first project in the university or similar things. So you deploy applications in a virtual machine or maybe in a bare metal host. So what is next? Right now it's like a huge evolution, and the people is moving and are starting to use containers. So it's like very popular solution right now, but there is a reason to use containers. So let's say that you are coming from a monolithic application. In order to move to containers, it's like you have to think in how to split your application in different functionalities and create like small services that can communicate each other. So in this way, you create, let's say, these tiny services that if you are using a microservices architecture, you can use this, call it the splitting the layers in the different functionalities, and you can communicate these functionalities with each other, and you can group up these different functionalities without touching another functionalities. So the containers give you that ability. Maybe you can use containers inside a virtual machine, or maybe you are using a virtual machine in the cloud, or the cloud machine, or an instance. It depends on which cloud you are using. The name is going to change. So maybe you are using that virtual machine with some containers and they are running. But the things that are in common in these layers, in the monolithics and containers, is that you are touching the infrastructure. So you are managing the things, installing the things, updating the things, and everything. So let's say that you have a real production environment. So you have to have somebody in your team to manage this infrastructure, maybe a DevOps engineer or operations engineer or something similar. Let's say that you don't have to spend time on managing infrastructure. Let's say maybe the project is small, and you don't have time and money for that. Here is where serverless come. You don't have to manage this infrastructure. You only publish your code. It's called functions as a code. So you only publish small parts of code that can execute some functionality in your system. So that's pretty different. That, let's say that this represents a kind of high level abstraction. In the monoliths, it's very pretty manual. You have access to the bare metal, and the abstraction moves in order to only publish code without managing any infrastructure. So as I was mentioning, you can do these things in the cloud, and there are like different kind of things that you can do with each kind of solution. For example, in a cloud platform, you can well, there's abstraction about the software, the network, and you can group up your instances. And in the containers, you have some kind of flexibility, but without touching the operating system at all. And you can group up your containers and resize it and uh, do that kind of things. In serverless, you don't have access to the host, and you don't have access to the operating system and any other thing. You only have access to publish that small part of code. So in general, across the time, let's say that we were starting on using infrastructure as a service, like having a virtual machine or a cloud instance in any cloud you use. Then we were starting to use containers, deploying the things in a virtual machine with the containers, and specialized services that publish your container and manage how to grow this container, like using or resizing the resources and the CPU, maybe some storage and that kind of things. So that's, we were called that serverless containers. So them, we don't know what the cloud providers are using behind the scene. Maybe they are using containers. At least with Google, looks like that. I'm pretty sure that maybe Amazon or Azure are using some kind of that kind of technologies. And then we are moving to the function platform as a service. Here's where our functions comes. The providers gives you that ability to only publish your code. So let's think on that. So for example, on the GKE part, we have like this managed platform to push your containers or create application or distribute systems or similar things. In the cloud functions, we have just the space to publish or functionalities using any language, but you don't have time to manage infrastructure. In the service of Cloud Run on GCP, we are talking about GCP services, self-managed services, cloud managed services, and in the Cloud Run, you are deploying a container image, but maybe you don't have also time to manage your infrastructure. So you want that Google take cares about that. Sometimes Cloud Run could be expensive just to deploy one service. So just take note about that. On GKE, you have the full control in your system. It's a cluster with different virtual machines that they are working together, deploying containers, managing your networking, your storage, how to scale the application, and that kind of things. But you need specialized people to manage this kind of infrastructure. So you have to put some money on that. Sometimes GKE could be bigger or could be big for your solution. Maybe let's say that is too much for you. And you can even have time to manage that infrastructure. It's pretty consuming, but there are some reasons to use GKE too. We are going to discuss that. So we were talking about self-managed services about functions. We were talking about self-managed services about containers, especially in the Cloud Run. We are talking about how to create a distributed system with a managed services on Google Kubernetes engine, the GKE. And how, in this place, Anthos, here we comes to like a kind of hybrid kind of solution. So Anthos has like different pieces to build your system. You can have like a managed part of services using a service mesh. That's something that we are going to discuss. But you are depending on the Google Container Engine. But the cool thing is when you are using Anthos, well, if you are using Anthos, it's because like you are using containers in that context. So if you are using Anthos, maybe you have a special use case when you are going to connect multiple cluster. You want that feeling of serverless and you want some control in your infrastructure. But maybe for the developers, it's pretty transparent, like using services on the Google Cloud. So in my experience, it's like something that I want to share. Sometimes Anthos could be complicated to install. So just take care about that. But we are mentioning like a service mesh in the last slides, but what is a service mesh? Well, let's say that maybe you have your container, but you are putting in front of that a small proxy that receives all the traffic. So this small proxy is going to ask to some components what to do with the traffic, to redirect the traffic to the original destiny, or block the traffic, or perform some action in that traffic. So basically, that's the thing that the service mesh does. Um, Let me show you. Well, here, as we are showing here, service mesh is implemented like a proxy network to manage the traffic. It's a service to service communication kind of thing. So you have, let's say, we are talking about containers and solutions using containers in this presentation. So basically what it does is like you have your original container, and there is a proxy in front of that container that receives the traffic and redirect the thing. In this image, you can see that kind of behavior. And a request outside your platform is going to your platform and is received by this small proxy, let's say the service mesh, and the service mesh capture this thing and decide what to do, and then redirect to your or your original container. If you are using a microservices architecture, let's say that your service mesh receive the traffic and redirect the thing to your microservice. To visualize this thing, is like the service mesh has different parts, a control plane and the data plane. The data plane is where your services are injected with a proxy, and this proxy asks to the control plane what to do with the thing. Is how a service mesh does. Anthos, inside of that, has an implementation of Istio. It's a custom implementation of Istio as, let's say, a managed Istio service called Anthos Service Mesh. So Knative, what is Knative? Let's say that you want to perform or that or give that feeling to your developers about using serverless, but maybe you need some control in your infrastructure and you need an open source solution. Well, Knative can give you like that part to abstract and give that kind of serverless feeling, or maybe a container as a service implemented from scratch. And Knative has some event-driven functionality for your applications, and that can help you to create some really nice applications with containers with that sense of serverless. Of course, Knative runs on Kubernetes. Here is, let's say, if you want to install Knative, here is how it looks. You install the kn command. Let's say that we are using Mac, so brew install kn. And with this command, we are going to create like a kind of serverless function using Knative in a Kubernetes cluster. If you want to create another version, let's say that you have to update that current serverless function, call it API in this case, you can pass a different environment variable with a different name, GDG Sophia-Antipolis version 2. You can also split the traffic between these two versions. Let's say that maybe you want to create a canary deployment or implement some deployment strategy. So it could be really useful for you. And this is how it looks if you use YAML definitions to deploy a service using Knative. And it's really interesting to see that Google use the same structure inside their platform. Of course, they are doing a lot of things more, but we don't know what they are doing. We just only have the idea. So how this thing is organized? At the end of the presentation, there is a link about some developer advocate from Google that explains this diagram. It's really nice. So I put it here for you. Let's say that there is a user that can use the UI, the CLI, or YAML configurations to deploy on a self-managed serverless platform using Kubernetes something that they're called Cloud Run for Anthos, and inside that they are using the Anthos service mesh with a custom installation of Istio, and to provide this kind of abstraction of Cloud Run for Anthos, they use Knative. So you have to install the Knative and be sure to install the Istio self-manager installation on your GKE cluster. This cluster could be from Google or an on-premise server. You can also install Anthos in a different cloud provider to connect, let's say, Amazon with Google, Azure with Google. There are some interesting integration for that. And the other is like you don't have control of your Kubernetes cluster and you are just using the Cloud Run directly. So Cloud Run uses directly this Knative API. I think that this Cloud Run is upside or this part. So they use inside the Knative API, and this Knative API is running on the Google infrastructure. So that's all about how Google abstracts their service and bring you that sense of serverless in your solutions. Something that is really, really awesome, I heard about this developer advocate, is that he mentioned that in this way they are changing the concept of serverless. So he said that the serverless philosophy is like efficient developers plus efficient operators. So Google is giving you the ability to deploy like their kind of infrastructure in your current Kubernetes cluster. So they are giving you, in that sense, an efficient operators, and in this way you can bring that efficiency to your developers to just implement functions using maybe a YAML definition or using the UI. And they integrate all these things to run the Cloud Run for Anthos with GKE plus the Anthos service mesh that is a custom Istio plus Knative. So that's Cloud Run for Anthos and the Istio for Knative. So the demonstration, okay, here's like the pretty nice treasure that I found. How to implement this is a little bit tricky. You have to enable some APIs here. Here's a command to implement your cluster, just like a kind of regular cluster. And here is the trick. You have to download this ASM CLI to install the Istio platform in your cluster. Plus, you have to install the Cloud Run for Anthos application. In that way, Knative will be installed and the Istio custom installation will be installed there. So for this demo, well, we are like creating a pretty basic code that shows a message maybe. And we are changing the message in the different platforms that we have. So let me show you that part. Well, here we have like a 4-node Kubernetes cluster, pretty standard, like using the last command that I showed you. Let's say that we already have deployed a container. Let me see here. We have a container with the code that we show in the slide, the Python code. And there we can find our container. So we have this container that has our Python code and everything, and we can use this to deploy the things in different platforms. For example, in the Cloud Run, if we deploy the thing, it's already deployed right now. It's pretty easy to use. Let's simulate that I am going to create this thing. So you can like, let's say, let's use this image. and the latest one. Um, you check if you want to allow all the traffic from the outside and secure your connections, and you just have to create the thing. Once it's created in the Cloud Run, this is the interface for that, or the UI. You are going to receive a URL depending how you deploy the thing. So with this URL, you can see that it's working right now. This thing says outside GDG Sophia-Antipolis using the Cloud Run. But as you can see, you don't have control about the infrastructure. So this is the Cloud Run service. Let's move to another level of abstraction. We were using like Google Cloud functions to deploy something. Let's simulate that we are going to create something, or no. Let's open our current function and edit the code. Well, for example, here you can see the code that is inside the function. You only have control to deploy the code. You don't have more control of compared with that, just the code. So with this thing, you are going to create your custom function. So you don't have more control. Something that is a problem is that you can modify the things that are running inside, and maybe an application that you are using to control the vulnerabilities is detecting that the containers use to deploy this function contains some vulnerabilities, but you can change it because you don't have control on that, and only Google have control of that. So you need another level of abstraction. There is where Google Cloud Run is going to help you. But let me see. Well, we have the Cloud Run, the functions. Let's run the function. I think that is, where is the link? Let me see. The link of these functions. This function is in details. Source, let me see. Okay, here is the link. Okay, this thing is GDG Sophia-Antipolis function. So it's using the functions. And as you see, the first time that you call the function is like they have like a lazy loading. So they have to create the infrastructure to respond that request. So it's going to take some time the first time. Then it's like the service is running and it's going to answer really, really fast. And finally, we have the Anthos. For Anthos, let me zoom a little bit my screen. You have to configure the cluster. You have your Gkey cluster running here, and this thing says that is running the Cloud Run for Anthos. The service mesh is enabled. It's enabled and it's installed inside. That is a different thing. So you have to take care about that. Once all the things are running, when you move to the Cloud Run for Anthos, you are going, let's say that I am going to create a service, and you need to choose your cluster, the namespace that this thing is going to run, and the name. Then you have to select the image that you are going to use, and then you have to deploy it. Once the thing is deployed, you will see the service in this dashboard. But let me open the CLI to see what the cluster have inside and how to run the things. It's just give me some minutes to show you that. I think it's the final part. And let's say, for example, that we want to create like okay, here is it. Okay, Here you can see in the namespace that, okay, let's authorize this thing first. Okay, you have Instio here and the Knative servings that were installed for you running the previous Google Cloud commands. So right now, here is a special object that were installed with the Knative, and they are already a Knative serverless function called Python application that is in this panel, as you can see, but it's dead right now. They are not like deployments running right now. It's scaled to 0. So let's say that I want to use that part. I have to run a small client there and run the thing. Let me see, where is the screen? Oh my god, sorry. Where is the, okay, here is it. Let's run the client. This thing is going to, oh my god, it's already existing, the thing. Okay, let's call it different. So this thing is going to create a client inside the cluster. So here it says that the current URL to access the service inside is called like that. Let's access that services running this. And after some time, right now is like creating the container, and this says that is GDG Sophia-Antipolis. It's a service running inside. Something that is really nice about this is that, for example, we can create like a second version, like another revision here. And let's say that I am going to deploy a new revision. This is the last step. And I am going to change the value of the variable that is receiving my application. Version be final, let's say, is the final version. So let's deploy, and it's going to show be final. As you can see here, the Google is using a YAML configuration that is using the Knative. So basically, you can migrate your Knative to the Cloud Run for Anthos or vice versa. So right now the thing is running, and there's something pretty interesting here. Sorry, that this says that the traffic is 0 because the previous version is used by 100%. So let's change this thing, and let's say that we are going to use for this version the 100% of the things. So right now, let me see, let's reload this. It's going to show you like, okay, right now it's running. And let's access the function again. I think that I have to open the CLI again. And we can access, okay. And here we can access the thing. And it takes some time. And they say that GDG Sophia-Antipolis is the final. And for the revisions, you can, let me restart the thing here. I think that we can, okay, I think that is the run function. Okay, the revisions and to the latest. Oh, well, I think that I deleted the other one. But for example, you can create like another revisions, and you can split the traffic 50 by 50, and this is going to split the thing. So, uh, oh no no no, here I am in the Cloud Run, and this is the Anthos service. Sorry. Uh, let's say that, for example, we can split the traffic with the revision tool. Let's say that is the this one, and let's split it 50 and 50, and let's see what happens. Okay, right now it's 50 by 50, and let's access the container again. Okay, so let me zoom this, and right now this thing has to create the service Sophia v1, Sophia v1, and right now it's creating the other container, and some Sophia-Antipolis by final, by final, by final, by one. So it's splitting the traffic. So let's remove this. That's the final. And if we look at the pods that they are running, they are like two versions running, and at the end, this thing is going to death after some seconds. The pods are going to disappear. So I think that it's all about my demo right now. Maybe if you have questions when we are waiting for the pods to be deleted or scale it down to zero, maybe we can have some questions.
There is no question in the chat, but I actually have one question, so do not
Mhm.
hesitate to post your questions in the chat.
Mhm.
I was wondering, so you presented like we can deploy two versions of an app. What
Mhm.
kind of real application we could do that? Is it like, for example, for migration? So you want to control the networking, the ingress coming?
For example, because you are using Istio here, as you can see, well, right now the pods are scaled to zero. This thing has the Knative inside, and the Istio, well, Knative use Istio to do their stuff. So with Istio, you can modify or configure how you are going to expose your application, how is to going to use the ingress controllers and that kind of things. So basically, with that kind of configuration, you can do whatever you want. So you can even expose using the YAML configurations or the dashboard to expose the service to a domain. So it's the way that you have to use to expose your applications. With Istio, and well, you have to create the DNS records and that kind of things, like a pretty regular Kubernetes cluster, and the way that you use using Istio to expose your application. So this thing in my demonstration is running inside the cluster because it's like easier to do so. But you can even use an external domain and expose your application using a URL, using a domain.
Okay, great, thanks. Do you want to continue your demo and take the question after, Sergio?
Okay. So, well, the final demo here is like, well, the services disappear, and maybe you want, I can recall my, oh, sorry, I think that this one is existing right now. And then you can recall the service. Something that is really interesting is that the dashboard gives you the URL. For example, here, I think that is the okay. Here is the URL. Let me zoom the screen a little bit more again, and let's call the service again. See what happens when we are doing this. Well, right now, as you can see, it's creating the thing. So it's like a serverless functionality works. If you are not using the things are going to scale down, and you are not going to pay for that time. So you are only have to pay for the time that the service is running. So yeah, that's basically about my presentation. And And I think that I have questions from Mila or David Aparicio. Says that, is there any service like Anthos on AWS or Azure? I think that there is, I don't remember the name, but there is something similar of EKS on AWS. I forgot the name, but there is something pretty similar that you can run on bare metal. On
I sorry, I'm interrupting, but I guess it's called Amazon EKS Anywhere. It's
okay,
like the own version of Ontos. Just
okay,
Google it.
okay, thanks.
You're
Well, so
welcome.
that's the name. It's pretty interesting. Well, I remember that maybe a year and a half they call it different. So that's really interesting. They are renewing their brands and the names. And okay, so that's the service that Donia mentioned. There is also from AWS some project that you can use to run your things on bare metal, like a kind of run the AWS Fargate on bare metal. Is something that you can use to. Is there the version 1.25 easy to move from another version to another? I think that right now the service has some general availability, but using the Kubernetes 1.22, I think that they are using that service right now. I think that there is not restriction to install the thing in yeah, maybe because are using a GKE cluster. I think that the version or the way that you can use Google Anthos is to deploy your custom Kubernetes cluster, not using the GKE service, and just deploy your custom cluster and try if Google Anthos can run on that. There is another thing here. For example, Davidis mentioned that they want to move or to try this on the latest Kubernetes version. For example, if Anthos doesn't fit these kind of things, the next step is to install your own Knative implementation in your cluster because you have that freedom and it doesn't matter the version. But you have to take care about what is the official support of Knative for the latest version of Kubernetes. But of course, in this case, will be like the next step for you to run not Google Anthos, maybe run the pure Knative in your cluster. And here we say, is there any service Anthos on OVH Cloud? Well, I don't know. I know that cloud, but I don't know a lot of services about that. But as you can see, if some cloud launch that kind of solution, they are fighting to launch similar features. Or maybe, let's say, for example, if you don't have this functionality, maybe you can use Knative and install Knative by yourself in your Kubernetes cluster. Could be like the next step for you. Another interesting thing is like this is like a kind of use case that's fine in some way in some place. It's like, for example, well, some people say that cloud functions are okay, are cheap, are nice, and everything, but when you are trying to apply for a security certification, the functions have some vulnerabilities that you don't have control to remove that kind of vulnerabilities. Google only have that control, and in this way, it's like the perfect use case to move to something managed by your team, like the pure Knative, not like something hybrid like Anthos plus your infrastructure. So that's another use case that you can use that. Okay, I know the cloud functions are cheap, but if your company is using or applying to a security compliance, I think that at the end is going to affect, and you will prefer to manage your services instead of using a full managed services from your cloud. Okay. I don't know if you have the answer. There is a new program called Between Google and Tails in this new cloud. Well, I don't know. In the Google and Tails, no, I have never heard about that. I think that maybe if you can wrote me in my Twitter account or something like that, maybe we can search together, or maybe I have that answer there. And
Yeah,
yeah.
just to let you know that Thales is a big French company. I don't know if you are
Ah,
aware of it. And there is currently I think an agreement between Google and Thales to build how it's called, um, a cloud, governmental cloud, I think, something like that, to protect data for for French and maybe European people.
okay. So I think that in that case, well, as we were looking, let me see the slides. Here they have, or they talk about, let me see, where is it? Okay. Here, they mentioned that this thing can run on your premise GKE cluster. So let's say that you have, I was looking like an example that they are running this thing on AWS. I don't know if it is like a kind of neutral kind of installation of Anthos for your bare metal cluster. I think that there is it, but not pretty sure. In that case, I think that that kind of solution can apply with this French company kind of service. I think so. Or maybe your company has support to Google, and maybe you can ask them for them and ask for that special feature for your team. That's the way that the high level support or the goal support of cloud companies works. So do custom solutions for you. So I think that is not impossible.
Okay,
Uh,
no more question.
let's
Uh,
see.
I have one last question, but
Okay.
a more general question,
Mhm.
because I'm a beginner in service mesh. I'm wondering what is the impact of service mesh in terms of performance. Uh, are there
I
some
think
impacts?
that, okay. For example, I think that for every cloud provider, they have some, let's say, managed service mesh implementations for each cloud provider. But in the inside, in the infrastructure, let's say, for example, is one of the service meshes that I use a lot is Linkerd. For example, Linkerd is designed to be really, really lightweight in order to don't impact in significantly in your services, because they use Rust to reduce that kind of latency. So I think that the concern, well, it depends on your service, because, well, you have to do some tests to be sure if it doesn't impact the things. But something that I found that the services are impacted is the time when you are provisioning the service with that proxy inside, because the service is injected with that proxy. You have to take care about the time of this service and the proxy are provisioned in order to don't impact that kind of downtime for your service. So I think that is some problem that the service, well, it's not a problem, it's like something that you have to work on, that when you are using a service mesh, how to don't impact with your services, where your services is injected with this kind of solution. And sometimes when you are using open source, looks like, well, to pretty unstable when where you are looking to the self-managed service for the service mesh that your cloud provider is giving you, you don't find that kind of problem. So at the end, you are choose the managed services service mesh from your cloud provider. So you have to test about what happened with your application, basically. And it depends. Linkerd works different from Istio. The concept is the same. But for example, Linkerd is huge. It's like has a lot of components. As I was looking to Anthos, they doesn't install the whole thing. For example, some companies prefer to use the component that creates the service mesh functionality in Istio that is called Envoy. So Envoy is the pure proxy. So maybe your company have the time to build that kind of proxy for your services. So, well, who knows? It depends on each use case of, because different companies have different kind of needs. So it's how it works.
Okay, okay. There is no magical answer.
Okay. Yeah, it's not, well, at the end you have to test.
Yes.
Sometimes maybe the right service mesh is not in your current cloud provider and could be significantly to maybe move to another one. But well, it depends the use case.
Mm. Okay. Okay, thanks. If there is no more question, maybe we can go to the networking session if you want to talk
I
to
have some
Sergio.
final slides here.
Yeah.
Okay. I can invite you to my, well, Cloud Native Guatemala. Well, we talk in Spanish there, but I don't know, maybe in Europe they know, some people know how to speak Spanish, or maybe you want to practice Spanish. You are invited. The links, well, I took this YouTube link with all the information that this developer advocate shows there, has a lot of parts inside my slide. The Knative official link and the links of my community of Guatemala. The slides, here are the slides. If you want to use it, go, you are free to use it. And well, I am, because I am writing a book right now. We will launch it, I think, at the end of September, maybe. Here is the link. And my Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, please. Okay, on my website if you want to contact me.
All right.
That's it.
Thanks, Sergio. So I propose you uh, to leave the stage, and we can talk to each other to everything you want.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sergio, for the talk. It was
Thank
very
you.
interesting. See you around.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.